Welcome to Mona's M2P channel. Today, we're dedicating a couple of minutes to one of the most prominent climate activists of our time, Greta Thunberg. In just a few short years, she has transformed from a solitary protester outside the Swedish parliament to a global symbol of climate activism. But how did this young girl from Stockholm become the voice of a generation? Over the next couple of minutes we will not only explore Greta's life and the events that shaped her, but also examine the global context in which she rose. We'll delve into her activism, the science that fuels her passion, and the many ways she has inspired both hope and controversy. Greta Tintin Eleonora Ernman Thunberg was born on January 3, 2003, into a family already deeply steeped in the arts and sciences. Her mother, Malina Ernman, is an internationally recognized opera singer, and her father, Svante Thunberg, is an actor and producer. But more than just being famous, her family also represents a deep intellectual and emotional connection to the climate struggle. Her father's lineage can be traced back to Svante Arrhenius, the Nobel-winning scientist whose early research laid the groundwork for modern climate science. But Greta's childhood was far from ordinary. She was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition she says has helped her see the world in a unique way, allowing her to hyper-focus on issues like climate change. From a young age, Greta was a deep thinker, often quiet, but intensely concerned about environmental issues. At just 8 years old, she first learned about the reality of climate change, and it marked her deeply. For years, she struggled with depression, feeling isolated by her fears for the future of the planet. In August 2018, Greta, then only 15 years old, took a drastic step. Instead of attending school, she sat outside the Swedish parliament, holding a sign that read "Skolstrejk för klimatet," school strike for climate. What motivated her? Greta has said that it wasn't just the science, but the inaction of adults and world leaders that pushed her to act. While others saw it as a problem for the future, she felt it was her responsibility to act now. Initially, she protested alone. But within weeks, Swedish media picked up the story, and her solitary protest began to inspire students around the world. Soon, the Fridays for Future movement was born. What was remarkable about this wasn't just the numbers but the fact that so many young people, who had previously felt powerless, were finding their voice. During these early protests, Greta would often sit with her now famous pigtails, simply holding her sign in silence. It's important to reflect on the symbolism of that silence. It spoke louder than any slogan. For many, this was the moment when the climate crisis became an issue not just for scientists and politicians, but for everyday people, especially the youth. To understand Greta's message, we need to pause and look at the science that drives her activism. Climate change isn't a distant issue. Scientists have long known that human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, have drastically increased the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This has led to rising global temperatures, extreme weather events, and the melting of polar ice caps. Greta has always emphasized that her activism is rooted in this science. She often says, "I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is." And she's right, the science is irrefutable. Yet, Greta isn't just calling for awareness, she's demanding systemic change. She's calling out the economic systems, the fossil fuel industries, and the politicians who have failed to prioritize the planet over profit. As Fridays for Future gained momentum, Greta's influence spread beyond Sweden. In December 2018, just 4 months after her first protest, she was invited to speak at the UN Climate Change Conference, COP24, in Poland. Her speech was short, but the message was clear: you are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. This was the moment when Greta's voice transitioned from a national to an international level. Following COP24, invitations began pouring in from global leaders and organizations, eager to hear from this fearless young activist. But it was her speech at the United Nations Climate Action Summit in New York in 2019 that truly solidified her as a global figure. Her famous words, "How dare you," resonated with millions, calling out world leaders for their failure to act on climate promises. With her rise to prominence, Greta also faced considerable pushback. While millions hailed her as a hero, others, including some world leaders and media commentators, dismissed her as naive or alarmist. US President Donald Trump, for example, mocked her on Twitter, sarcastically calling her a very happy young girl. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro labeled her a brat. Despite this, Greta remained steadfast, unshaken by the personal attacks. But it's important to consider why she faced such criticism. Greta was not just asking for incremental changes, she was demanding radical reform. She was challenging deeply entrenched systems that prioritized economic growth over environmental responsibility. For some, she represented a threat to the status quo. Activism at such a young age comes with a price. Greta has spoken candidly about the emotional and mental challenges of being thrust into the global spotlight. Asperger's, which she views as her superpower, also makes her sensitive to the overwhelming nature of fame. She's described the weight of feeling responsible for a movement, the pressure to speak on behalf of millions, and the strain of living up to people's expectations. Yet Greta channels these challenges into her activism. Her authenticity and vulnerability, her willingness to show the emotional toll that the climate crisis takes on her personally, resonates with many. She embodies the deep anxiety that many young people feel about the future, but she also gives them hope through her determination. Beyond her speeches and school strikes, there have been pivotal moments in Greta's activism that deserve recognition. One of these was her decision to sail across the Atlantic Ocean to attend the UN Climate Summit in 2019. Greta refused to fly due to the environmental impact of air travel and instead opted to make the journey in a zero-emission sailboat. The journey took 2 weeks and was symbolic of her commitment to living her values. Another key moment was the publication of her book, No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference, a collection of her speeches that has inspired millions. These speeches, filled with stark truths and calls to action, highlight Greta's ability to communicate complex scientific issues in a way that's accessible and compelling. Despite only being in her early 20s, Greta's legacy is already profound. She has inspired a new generation of climate activists who are continuing the work she started. Her Fridays for Future movement continues to mobilize millions of students around the world, demanding action from their governments and corporations. Yet Greta is quick to remind us that the fight is far from over. She continues to speak out, attending summits, giving interviews, and pressuring leaders to take more aggressive action. She remains a staunch advocate for environmental justice, calling not only for a halt to climate change but also for a fair and equitable world where those most affected by the crisis, often poorer and marginalized communities, are given a voice. As we wrap up this episode, it's evident that Greta Thunberg's influence on the world is profound. What began as a lone protest by a young teenager has blossomed into a worldwide movement, sparking crucial conversations about climate change that can no longer be ignored. Her journey from quiet protester to global icon has galvanized millions, challenging governments, industries, and individuals to take meaningful action for the future of our planet. Greta's impact is not only undeniable, it's a reminder of the power of youth, persistence, and the courage to demand change. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts and what you'd like to see next. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories.